Perseverance, determination, and a lot of training are required to compete in an ultra run. Diane will tell us about some of the obstacles she had to overcome and where she finds her strength.
I was very fortunate. I was one of the top athletes in Colorado. I was a state champion in golf, top basketball player in Colorado. I eventually became the state champion in tennis, so I ended up leaving high school early and played professional tennis. And while I was on the pro tour, I was realizing that I was having these funny sensations. They were brief and they were quick, but I thought everybody had had these sensations. Well, those continued, and I threw a grand mal seizure. And so as I had the seizure, went to the hospital and was with doctors numerous times, back and forth through my pregnancy. And about 7 months into my pregnancy, I was in bed. In the middle of the night, I started seizing again, and the eyes were at the back of my head, and I was biting my tongue, and Scott called the ambulance. And ambulance came out, went back to the hospital, and met with another doctor, another neurologist. As we were sitting down at that point, he said, "Diane, we need to put you on medications. You're having seizures." So I opted for medication at that point in time. And as the years continued, I continued to have more and more seizures. And the seizures got worse. And I went from doctor to doctor to doctor. And finally, there's the Epilepsy Foundation of Colorado right here in Denver. And the executive director, I talked with her, and she got me in touch with Mark Spitz. So Mark sent me off to have an MRI done, and we met the following week. And as he took the slide of my MRI, put it up into the camera with the lights on the back, and he was showing me the different parts of my brain. And he pointed to this one spot on my brain, and what you could see was a small scarring on my right temporal lobe. And he said, "Do you know what you have?" And I said, "Mark, I have seizures. I don't know what that means, but they say I have seizures." At that point in time, Mark said, "Diane, what you have is epilepsy." None of the medicines worked. I always either had allergic reaction or the side effects were too severe that they didn't control my seizures. And at that point in time, Dr. Spitz said, "Well, Diane, there is this brain surgery that's available. Because of the scarring on your brain, you might be a candidate for this type of brain surgery because your seizures might stem from one spot in your brain." And the very first test that I had to have done was called an EEG monitoring test. And this was a point in time where they wanted me to go into the hospital and they wanted me to have seizures. They literally sandpapered each one of these little electrodes onto my brain, taped them down to my head very tightly, and they put me into a room. And I was hooked into a 5-foot cord, and this cord was hooked into a television set. And what this television set was showing what each and every one of these electrodes were doing on my brain. I remember laying there, and then I got that funny sensation that I talked about that I had for years. It's called an aura. And I always had a premonition or aura before I had a seizure. And it was the first time I didn't fight it. And sure enough, a couple minutes later, I came out of this horrendous seizure. And I remember there was blood coming out of the side of my mouth. I had a horrendous headache. I was in this heavy labored breathing, and I was exhausted. I remember Dr. Spitz, he was there at my side when I came to and came around. And I remember him looking at the TV screen and looking at every one of my brain waves that were coming from each of my electrodes. And all of a sudden, Dr. Spitz, he puts his fist up in the air. "Yes, we got it." And he said, "Diane, your seizures come from one area of your brain. They come from that spot on your brain from when you had scarring as an infant." And as he was looking at that film of me seizing, I said, "Dr. Spitz, I need to see what my children and my family saw for years." And he replayed the film, and it showed me having a grand mal seizure. And I remember laying there in bed just thinking, oh my gosh, this is what my children and my family and my friends had to see. Now I understand how they felt the way they did. Well, you know, I had my last seizure the night before my surgery. But because of the brain surgery, I am seizure-free, I am off medicines, I am living this wonderful life, but now I deal with the brain injury. Organizational skills are difficult, time management, my short-term memory's been impaired. I've lost vision from the surgery. I struggle daily with where I need to be, where the kids need to be, what do I need to do. But would I do it again? I'd go again tomorrow. So what I do is I use my legs as my words. And that is why I run these 100-mile races. Because when I get an opportunity, I run these races and I win them or I do well, it's not about, wow, look at me. It just gives me an opportunity to talk about how we all have trials and tragedies in our life and how do we deal with those. But I had the opportunity last June. I ran my first 100-mile race. And I ran for a period of 31, 32 hours. And once again, sleep deprivation and stress are the #1 triggers in seizures. So as I'm running through this race all night, all day, and I remember running to that finish line. I remember going over the line. I didn't have a seizure. I placed. But as I finished that race, the Epilepsy Foundation asked if I would come talk to the kids at Snow Mountain Ranch. We send 10 to 20 kids every year who have severe epilepsy. And And what motivates me, whether it being just myself and my children and my family, was as I'm talking to these kids, I was telling them, don't ever let a doctor tell you you can't do something. I said, you can. You might need to do it differently. If you want to swim in the ocean, you take somebody with you. There is nothing you cannot do. And we're all sitting around and we're talking, and one of the girls said to me, her name was Mandy, not only do I have seizures, I have cerebral palsy. I can't run. And Mandy looked at me and she said, will you do your next 100-mile race for me? If you do another one, would you do it for me? And then all the kids said, yeah, would you run races for us? And Diane, would you run races and tell others that we're normal? Just because we have seizures, we're not any different. We don't want to be treated differently. If only these kids knew what they gave me. And so, I signed up for another 100-mile race 3 weeks later. And I did another, and I did another. And in November, I ran a 100-mile race in San Diego where all the fires were, and I won that race. But when I was on that mountain, all I could think about were those kids. So what motivates me, it's not just myself, it's the children I work with, and I'm trying to teach others that there's not limitations. Limitations is what we put on ourselves. And that is a story that I'm trying to get out on how we all have obstacles, how we all have trials. So that's why I'll continue to run and continue to do what I'm doing. I think to me, you don't realize how fortunate we are until something's taken away. And my health was taken away. And it's every morning I just get up and I say, thank you, Lord. It's a gift. Every day is a gift. And you just learn to appreciate life. And because of what I've been through, I've learned that. I used to take life for granted. I was invincible. I was this great athlete. And now that I've been through my epilepsy, my brain surgery, I've really learned. And what I want to tell people is how important each and every day is.